Happy Monday, y'all. This is Charlene from Lady in Waiting 222, and today is our Monday Mini Devotional. Today is week 3 of a 4-week focus on a woman in the Bible for Women's History Month. And today we are focusing on the woman with the issue of blood. A very popular story, but I wanted to highlight a few things, of course, and see what we can learn from this woman. There are 3 accounts of this story in Scripture in the Gospels found in Matthew, in Mark, and in Luke. I'll be reading from Mark's version, which is Mark chapter 5, verses 25 through 34, the New Living Translation. And it says, "A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them. But she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. Immediately the bleeding stopped, for she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him. So he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." This woman, who was defined by her condition in Scripture, was in need. She was in need of breakthrough and healing, physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual. How do I know this? It says she was constantly bleeding. That was her health condition. It speaks to physical healing. It says that she suffered a great deal from many doctors but had no change. She had gotten worse. That's emotional healing and needing a breakthrough. When instead of getting better, when she sought out the ones who she felt could help her, she got worse. She spent all she had to pay them. She had nothing left. Some need a financial breakthrough, right? And also, something that's not necessarily highlighted, but if you know the custom of that day and the culture and the laws of that time, she was also disconnected from community because she was considered ceremonially unclean and thus had to be separated from the community. And you can find out more about this in Leviticus chapter 15, verses 19 through 33. Because anything she touched would become unclean. Anywhere she sat would become unclean. So she was separated from community, separated and disconnected from her community for 12 years. Now, I don't know about you all, but those of us who still have a cycle, I can't imagine bleeding for those who may bleed 7, 14 days, however long your cycle lasts. But I can't imagine bleeding for 12 years, constantly, continuously. I can't imagine it. So it says she heard about Jesus and she took a chance and touched his robe. What made her dare to touch his robe? A rabbi, the high priest, being willing to defy all protocols and Levitical laws, the customs of the day. Here we see faith in action. As a result of her suffering, she was desperate. She had nothing to lose. She thought, if I can touch his robe, I will be healed. She didn't say, I think I will be healed. She didn't say, perhaps I might be healed. She didn't say, maybe I will be healed. She said, if I can just touch him, if I could just touch his robe, I will be healed. And in response to her faith in speech and action, as we see, she received her healing, her physical healing first, because she felt it in her body as we read on. She was in a crowd, right? And the crowd was pressing around Jesus, as the disciples mentioned, or that they described it in this text. Yet she reached out. She pressed her way. She made her way to be able to touch Jesus' robe. Suffering we see, desperation we see, faith we see, and ultimately the result is healing. There was no pride in this place, but pursuit, a pressing, a desperation that led to her healing. I find myself asking, how does one still have faith after all these years in her condition, both physically, emotionally, relationally, because she was separated, financially, spiritually, knowing what was at stake? How could she have faith of all these after all these years, knowing what was at stake? The culture of the day, what may have become of her for reaching out and daring to touch a rabbi, the high priest, when she was ceremonially unclean. But it didn't matter. She moved in faith and received her healing. In response to her act of faith, her willingness to reach out to touch Jesus, she immediately received her healing. The woman could have received her healing and moved right on, right? But we read on, yet at the same time she felt her healing, she felt the blood stopping. Jesus also realized that healing power had gone out from him, and he sought to find out who touched him. She could have walked away. That was her chance to just quietly move past the crowd and go back to where she had come from. But no, yet again, she took another step of faith in fear, while frightened, while trembling, as some translations say, at what she had just experienced. And instead of hiding, she came out. She came forward and she fell at his feet. The ESV says she spoke up and told him the whole truth. She didn't hide. Suffering has a way of either making us prideful or humble, more desperate or further disconnected. This woman chose to press her way to the one, the only one who she knew would heal her, as we see in her action. She moved in faith and was instantly healed. Jesus acknowledged it was her faith that had made her well, faith that was followed by action. In that moment, her suffering was over. She was no longer suffering or separated, but well and healed, connected, and in peace, as Jesus told her to go in peace. When suffering leads to desperation, I encourage you, I implore you, I dare you to take steps of faith, to risk it all, to be desperate enough to reach out to the one who can do something about your suffering, about your condition, and receive your healing today. You all be blessed, be encouraged, take care, and we'll talk again soon.